Okay, Philip. Well, I think there's another one of my daughters. Yeah.
All
Um,
right.
I think you can get going now.
Mhm. So maybe a little introduction of
Oh, wait a
myself.
minute. Yeah. Now, first of all, let me make screen sharing available to you.
Mm-hmm.
So you
This
can
should
share
go
your
now.
screen whenever you want. Yeah.
Yes, that should go now. There we are. Okay. So you have my screen now, I suppose.
Yeah, I can see it.
So I did some preparation. Let me introduce myself, maybe. I'm an old friend of Frank Notteboom. I live in Belgium. I'm not a professional photographer anyhow, but pinholes are, well, something I practice for a long time. It's something on the very basics of photography, I think. It's used to explain photography to people who start with photography. It is even older than photography itself. What most of you will know is the principle of the camera obscura. I hope it's big enough.
Well,
Bigger.
it
So
hasn't.
what do we have here? In fact,
We kunnen het niet zien.
kun je het niet
We
zien?
hebben op uw eerste scherm staan, ja.
Wacht een keer. We hadden dat er juist ook in Frank.
Ja, op een andere manier gedaan en dan ging het wel.
Yes. And this one?
Yes.
Ja, we zijn er.
Yep. There we are. So I was talking about the camera obscura. What is this, in fact? I hope everybody knows a bit the principle of that. It's just a black box with a tiny hole here on one side, and on the other side there's a projection of the image without there being a lens or anything else. It was first described about 400 before Christ in China. Leonardo da Vinci observed it. The painters in the Renaissance era used it to study perspective and so on. And so this existed before actually photography was being used. And alongside with the classic photography with lenses, this was used at the beginning of photography also. Afterwards, as technique developed and photography was taking this evolution, pinhole photography went to the background and wasn't all that important anymore. As to a point that nowadays everybody has huge cameras and mega definition pictures, whatever. And some people want to go back to basics effectively. And pinhole photography is for me all about going back to basics. I'm going to stop this and maybe, no, that's not a good one. I'll try to share another one. Can you see this picture now?
First, share your
No.
screen again. Share the screen again.
No?
No. If you go back to your original page,
Yeah, I suppose so. I'm back. Share screen. Yeah, it's a bit. I'm not used to this one. We try this one. Share.
yeah,
And now we're back.
yeah, back to the original page.
The
Yeah.
thumbnails.
And do you see a picture now?
All your pictures.
All your thumbnails. You need to open before sharing the screen. You must
Yes.
open the first pic and then share the screen and selecting the first pic you want to see it.
Mhm.
And then
I did this, but
close first share the screen, open the pic you want to exhibit, and then share the screen again and choose this pic to open.
yeah, and that doesn't. Yeah, I got it. Well, there we are. So this is one of a series about the sea, and it gives a good idea of what Pinhole is all about, I think. The difference in sharpness, the depth of field, the general atmosphere of it. Pinhole is not, it's not a filter, it's not an Instagram thingy, it's not a technique, it's more, well, something which in some cases is interesting to use in photography. What remains important for me is the image itself. If it's a bad image, it stays a bad image, and you won't make it better by using a technique, whether it is a pinhole or anything else. Keep that in mind, I think. My idea of this presentation is to make you wonder if for some applications that could be something interesting. If I hope to stimulate you to enthusiast you for trying this. And it's very easy to do. How do we get started? Well, I'm back. How do we get started? Well, you have commercially available pinhole cameras, analog things, which are very simple. In fact, they are black boxes with a shutter, and that's it. But if you really want to get started, the easiest thing to do is what we all have. So we all have this type of camera. Anyway, we all have our body cap. And the easiest way to start with pinhole is just, well, I can hold it real close. I just drilled a hole in it in the center. You tape some silver paper, aluminum foil on the inside. You take a needle and you make a small hole. And that's all it is. Now, if you look it up on the internet, you'll see same thing here. It is available. You can buy this, but in fact, well, it's the same thing. The only advantage of a pinhole body cap you buy is that lots of theories about it, but the important is that the size of the hole and the perfection of the hole will make your image a bit more usable. It will be sharper. The distance to your film or sensor will be more exact, and those things. You can play with that. You can look it up. There exists so many techniques, but I don't think that is all too important to get started. One thing that is very important is the difference between the digital process and the analog process. If you start, digital is easy because, well, all you do is take a picture as you usually take a picture, because you set your camera on, well, I use aperture selection. So the camera takes its exposure time with the aperture, well, your small pinhole as a guide. So you don't have to think even. It's very easy. You just, if you have live view and you're lucky and it's not too dark, you even see your picture. In bright sunlight, you can just look in through your camera like you used to, and you can compose. Of course, as our exposure times are so long, the tripod is very welcome. That is one thing. We're talking about at least 1 second to maybe minutes or longer in exposure time. But to get started, digital is very nice. Why would you go and take your old film camera? Because the nature of the pinhole, so you have an image that is not really sharp. And the grain of the film is giving a more natural look to that unsharpness than your pixels in your digital camera. So if you go all the way and you go with a classic analog camera and you print it really, you have the best results. But that's a lot of work for a result which is not it's not a huge difference. But as you go along with it, I like to work with film. It gives a nicer image for the pinholes. But to start with, as I say, it's fairly easy. So tonight, all you have to do is take your drill bit out, draw your body cap, go along with your silver foil, and give it a try. That's one way, of course. What is important, technically speaking, there is one effect which is rather important, and is the fact that if you go in long exposure times, you actually have to expose even longer. I explain myself. As long as you sit in these series, your camera measures in a normal situation. You have here, what is it? An aperture of 22, 1/6 of a second as an exposure. Your pinhole is so tiny. We're talking about, say, an aperture of 1/28. So here we are already talking about half a second of an exposure time. Yes, so far so good. That's in the normal exposure times for our film or sensor. Now, this is real bright sunlight, but in normal circumstances, we go a lot more in that direction, and we are talking about times like 3, 4 seconds, 15 seconds and longer. And then the curve goes like this. If you already go for 4 seconds, you may effectively have to make an exposure of 15 seconds. If we're talking 30 seconds, we're talking already several minutes, and so on and so on. So that's it's a technical term for it. You can look it up. It's the how do we call it in English? The reciprocity effect. Whatever. But I don't want to make it too technical, but this is the only thing I think, technically speaking, which you're taking into account. Now, what other things do we have? Now I'm going to try to share a screen again. I need a specific picture here to explain something. Yes, like this one. Stop share. No. How did I do it last time? Yeah. This one. This is a nice example about some technical aspects. It's not a good photograph. I took it yesterday just to explain some things. What you see here is, first of all, it's a wide angle picture, but all the lines here are straight. It's not like in a super wide lens that your lines are curved. All lines remain straight. That is one thing. Sharpness, well, relative sharpness, whether you look at the bricks here or the stone, which is 2 centimeters of your pinhole, they're relatively as sharp one to the other. That's an effect which is typical for pinholes and which you can take advantage of. So what you see here on the sides is vignetting. That's also typical for pinhole pictures. Bit of the charm. Sometimes with a DIY pinhole, you have it more because your pinhole isn't centered exactly. Sometimes if you overdo it with your wide angle effect, which is basically the closer you get your pinhole to your sensor or film or whatever, the more a wide angle thing you have. Huh? You still see my picture while I'm talking? No, I mean myself?
Yes.
Yes, yes.
Yes. Well,
Anyway,
Foto, we zien de foto.
ja, maar Frank, je ziet de twee.
Nee, ik zie enkel uw foto van de stoep en de...
Okay, yeah. No, what I want to say is one of the things, you can make a telelens pinhole or a wide angle pinhole just by making your pinhole closer to your film or further from your film. You don't have to focus or anything. It's always in focus. Depending on the distance, you can enlarge or make your pinhole smaller. Again, look it up, experiment a bit, but basically these body cap pinholes are more or less usable.
Filip, versta ik dat juist dat het door de grootte van uw gaatje is dat het eerder breedhoek of tele krijgt?
No, it's not the size of your pinhole, it's the distance between your pinhole and your film, which makes...
De lens effect.
The lens effect. So if you're going close to your film, yeah, you
Got
have a wide angle. If you're going further away, you have a small tele effect. That's it.
And how can you bring your hole further away from the sensor or the film by using?
Oh, well, you have these, if you
Extension rings.
take on the idea of the body cap, you have, for example, these macro rings. Yes. Wait a minute. Must have them somewhere. Yes. I stop sharing. I'll show you something. I have some tool equipment here on the back. Look, these are macro rings which you put between the lens and your camera to come closer to make macro photography. Well, these you can use in combination with your body cap to effectively use one or two, or the two together, or the big one or the small one, and so you can make some variations. These are cheap. They shouldn't be coupled with light measurement or whatever. It's well, usable for thingy like that. Other questions, technically speaking?
And always is in focus, using the rings or not, closer on or far.
No, it's always in focus. You don't have to focus. That's the whole thing. An explanation for that is, you know, the depth of field effect in a classical camera. Yes, if you have a large aperture, you have practically no depth of field. If you have a small aperture, you have more and more depth of field. So imagine that you're going past your standard 22 aperture and you're going to 36, 44, 128, 256. Well, it's getting bigger and bigger, your depth of field. And that's why you don't have to focus. The aperture is so tiny that it becomes, that's the idea.
There's a tripod. A
Didn't
tripod.
hear.
Do you use a tripod?
Yes.
Yes.
You need a tripod because your exposure times are so long. Otherwise, you get a shaky image. And that's not the same as an unsharp image by the pinhole effect.
Okay.
Sometimes I don't bother for a tripod. I even take action pictures on the streets because it's not so important then. It works if you will take your ISO figures to 3,200, 6,400, you end up with an exposure time of, say, 1/10 of a second or something in that region. That works in sunny weather. You can work without a tripod. But if you, generally speaking, what kind of things you will photograph, things with a graphical photo or vivid colors, or well, it's not for sports photography. You see, it's more for landscapes. For Frank, I see you laughing. No, it's some things are nice to do, some don't work. Look, I try to show you some more things, like this one. Yeah. You see, that's also one on.
Yep.
It's from a series, and I think it's a bit. Therefore, Frank asked me to do this presentation in the first place. That was a series that I took some months on different seas. And it works because you have this contrasty light, these very simple, clear lines in the picture. And you see the sand here is nearly sharp. The shoreline in the background is nearly sharp, but it's not like a normal picture. Would this work as a normal picture? I think so. But sometimes details or structures can be diverting from the real picture.
Is it a digital pic or a film pic?
This is a film picture, yes.
Mhm.
This was taken with, well, some very, very, very cheap ready-made camera. It's 35 millimeter. Yeah, but it's nice. It was actually not even a negative, but a positive print, which is scanned here. And I go back to another.
You can, when you open the first pic, you can scroll around your pics.
Yeah.
You want.
Look, if you look at this one, this digital one, you see it's different. But yeah, I'm scrolling now. That's also one I took some days ago. You see, it's for the depth of field, for the focus. I took this one. Oh, that's also an effect. If you have the sun in your face, these rays here, that's something you can't avoid. So sometimes you can take it as an advantage, but most of the time it's just, well, not so nice. Another one to show. This is without a tripod. This was just, well, it was a bright day. I forced it up to 12,800 ASA or something, and it worked. But you see, it's not really sharp like the other ones. I think I moved it a bit. Look, the portrait. This was a digital one. But again, contrast is rather important. Dynamic range isn't that huge. If you look at these details, you don't have any structure or detailing in those things.
It's a film.
No, this was a digital one. It was last summer. This is a self-portrait. Even that works. It was the same day. This is digital too, I think. Yes. That's another one I took. So this is all very close. It's also a digital picture. It's with a pinhole cap I made myself, and well, that works. That's where we started. That's one of the C series. Oh, this is an interesting one. The picture itself is not that special, but as you see, there are two ghosts here. That's my motorbike and my wife. The motorbike is long gone. That's a real ghost. The wife is still there. But what is important, due to these long exposure times, you can have the effect that people are walking through the image. They stop and they walk through, and you have a real ghost. Sometimes it's funny, sometimes it's interesting. No, I'm going to stop share and go back to these in the first place. It's not that easy still, but this is an interesting one. This is, I believe, the very, very, very first pinhole I took some 15, 20 years ago, and it was in Tunisia. It's an analog picture, and it was with a homemade body cap. You see that? The vignetting on one side is rather heavy here, but it doesn't bother me. What is important is you see this dust on a digital picture. Any dust you have on your sensor will be visible. Okay, you can polish it away and Photoshop or whatever, but be aware it is very, very, very visible. That's one of the things to take in mind. But I still love this picture. It's simple, but okay. So what else have we got? And that's another one of these first series about the sea. You see shadows, clear lines, vivid colors. This is what works on pinholes for me. You're very happy to live in Spain with all this light. That's one of the reasons I want to visit Frank, to have a go and make some pictures there. I suppose we will have plenty of opportunities there. The sea, the mountains, the air, the blue sky, shadows. Sounds promising to me. I try. That's another one of this series. Keep it simple, I'd say.
With the digital pics, do you shot RAW or JPEG?
Most of the time, just JPEGs. I don't think you will have a big advantage in shooting RAW in this case, because You don't have to sharpen up. If it looks good on the screen, well, you won't better it a lot in post-processing. So why bother and make RAWs? What I think is the bigger your sensor or the bigger your negative or whatever, the better your results. So if you have in this case, I'm not a camera nut, but if you have a full size camera, even an old one, it's always better than an APS-C or a micro four thirds or whatever. The bigger the sensor size or the bigger the film size, the better. If you have one. Another one. Still not that easy to share what I want to share, but yes. These are all on the same camera I ever bought. Take it. That's this one. So it's 35mm camera. Any film on it? No, I don't think so. If you look closely, there's an exposure guide on it. It's very, very basic. You can, well, in bright sunlight, we're talking about 1.5 to 3 seconds, overcast 6 seconds, morning or dusk 7 seconds or upwards, and there you go. But it actually works, and an advantage of film is also that you have a rather big margin, even if your picture is a bit underdeveloped or overdeveloped, it doesn't matter all that much. And in the end, you have a usable picture with these pinholes. Nice about this, it's a pocket camera. It uses standard 35mm film, and it costs next to nothing. It's these holes cost maybe, I don't know, 40 euros or so. So it's worth the investment. And it's not that heavy as your standard camera with the body cap and whatever. So if you passed the first digital experience, this is a nice one to go on with. I have others too. It's some time ago since I used this one. This is a huge negative. It's 6 by 12, so it uses roll film 120. If you remember all days long ago, I made an exposure guide for it, a bit more in detail. Well, like I showed you just on that piece of paper, it's very basic, but it works. Thing is, you see, you have an angle of view which is huge, but well, it's some years ago since I used it, and I only have negatives, but I didn't ever scan it, I suppose. So I should have a look where they are. But it's a nice thing. It's a bit bulky. It takes some time, but well, it's one of the possibilities. What have we got? This one too is a nice one to explain some things. You see here in the foreground, you even see the structure of the bench to sit on. Same one like this one. It's even like the foreground is a bit sharper than the background, but it has to do with the definition, I think. This also was one of my first digitals, I think. Any questions there?
I have a question. I really like all the colors in the photographs. Do these colors come from the fact that you work with Pinhole and that you don't go through glass, or is there another reason?
I don't think so, Frank. Well, wait a minute. No. I tried to share another one. I think I know what you mean, like this one. It was on film, it was morning light, it was a bit underdeveloped, so I had to make the best of it. And then this is what you get. Same thing here. This is more realistic of what it was. Sometimes when you scan a negative of a pinhole, you get some weird results and you try to adapt it like the sky is blue as it should be. But basically, I think if the light isn't okay, you can't change that. You can't, something flat, you won't look at this. These water parties were there. It was morning light. It was the sky like it was. So the colors, yes, they are a bit, the dynamic range is different than in film or a sensor. That is, when you use a lens, I mean, that is true, but it can help, but not necessarily. It's always a bit of a surprise.
I have a question. Well, I didn't hear it. You might have explained at the beginning. How can you never get everything in focus? Is it always soft?
It is always soft, yes. The better your tripod and
I mean, it makes it look very painterly, and then mixed with the colors and the grain, it's very beautiful. But you never get anything sharp.
No, real sharp, then you need a lens. That's the idea. Yes.
It's lovely. I like that. The football goalpost is my favorite.
Nice. He's one top.
For the colors and the shapes.
Good stuff.
Yes, it's really about color and shape and graphic images. It's not about technical perfection, or no. If you want to photograph, I don't know, texture or something, that won't work. That's right, because you need that better definition. It's
no definition.
Sharpness. Yeah.
I have an old pinhole camera.
Oh.
Brownie.
Yeah.
Which I haven't used in 20 years.
Go ahead. Yeah, I'm just scrolling a bit through these pictures. Again, that was to explain. That's in front of my house yesterday or the day before. You see these flowers are sharp, the car in the background, the house in the background. This is 10 centimeter, this is 20 meters, so it's always in focus, but not sharp. These we have seen, yes. It's more about, well, you see this line on zich, it's sharp, but it's not sharp. It's in focus, but that's it. Here again, this is a free-handed picture. So you see it's a bit shaky, but same idea, everything is more or less in focus. That's one why I say this tripod, is it ever always necessary? I don't know. This is not sharp, even not by pinhole standards. It moved a bit, but I still like the image and I still like the light here and the whole idea. It doesn't bother me that it's not perfect.
No, it looks like they look like paintings. Looks like painting. Nice.
This was also with this cheap camera, this small camera, was last summer. Yeah. So this is why how the painters in the 16th century used it. So this is something like a matte glass plate. There's a wall, and so they could study things like perspective and so on. There's another one at the sea. So that was a bit all, I think. I hope you enjoyed it a bit.
And just a question: how change the result using depending on the size of the hole?
How to measure it, or how to what was your question exactly?
Both. How to measure the size of the hole, and what change if you use a bigger hole or a smaller hole?
Well, you can look it up. If you look up pinhole photography, there are lots of theories, and we're talking about hundreds of millimeters relatively to the distance of your, say, for a 35 millimeter camera, and you want a slight like a 35 millimeter lens, so you have to take this distance, and then the perfect pinhole would be something like 0.25, say. That gives you an aperture of 180. And this might be the best, but you can buy sets on eBay with apertures of ranging from 0.18 to 0.35, and then you can start experimenting yourself, and you will see, if you go that far, that there are really differences, that some pins will, in combination with that distance and that film and whatever, give a better sharpness than others. If you go for a portrait lens, for example, your distance to your film becomes bigger, so you need a bigger hole. But how big? Try it. It's not, well, there are figures, you can look it up, and that is a starting point, but it's not well, exact in any way. And I didn't go that far because I'm not really interested in technique on sich. I mean, it's like cameras. You can buy cameras and equipment till whatever. I like to take photographs in the first place, but if you want to, you can study it till. I have my stuff too. I like cameras. I have loads of cameras, too many. So if you have time and you want to go deeper on the subject, there's lots to find on the internet. There's an International Pinhole Day. There are Facebook groups. There are sites with guys who can give you figures from here to America and back. So there's lots to find. There's a very vivid community working on pinholes. So if you want to dive deeper into the subject, have a go. You'll find a lot of information. But I think that for this, this is an introduction. It can get you started. The whole idea of a body cap or a cheap camera is something, well, if you like your first results, you can go further in with it and the rest, I think. Well, hope that answered your question a bit. Anybody else? Any questions anymore?
No.
No.
So a very good presentation and very
Yeah.
interesting and a lot to think about.
Thank you, Philip. Yeah.
Thank you, Philip.
Nice to hear.
Thank you. Thank you.
Very much.
You're welcome.
Yeah. No, that's worth trying. That's worth, perhaps we should have a challenge for that.
Well,
A pinhole
I
challenge.
I used to explain this to teenagers some 20 years ago. Well, very, very, very basic, with a shoebox with a small hole in it, a piece of photographic paper. You place the whole thing somewhere, you go for a drink, and after 2 hours you come back, you go to the dark room and you develop what you got. And it's so wow, that moment, because people don't realize what photography is all about. And then you can start explaining about aperture and exposure time and light and whatever. It's even simpler than what we do now. There were not yet the digital reflexes and whatever. So we had to make do with what we have. But to start the whole idea of photography, pinhole also is very interesting. Or to start with darkroom or
Okay. I will try with my film camera with a Mamiya 6x6. I got some film and black and white, but I will try to do it. Something. Thank you.
Okay.
Heel hartelijk bedankt. Ik denk dat ik deze namiddag begin.
Ja, kunnen we beginnen met een houtje te boren?
Mijn boormachine ligt klaar.
Ah, wel, kijk. Als er iets is, dan moet je het maar... ben je ook van België?
Om Belgiekske, ja.
Ah, bon, ja.
West-Vlaming geland in Limburg.
Oei, oei, ja. Dat is niet raar, nee?
Are we done?
Okay, I'm going to get started this afternoon.
All right. Like to hear that. Okay. Well, sometimes I see you guys passing on Frank's Facebook page, and now and then have a look at the sites. So maybe I'll visit more often.
Maybe when we have the Pinhole challenge, you can comment on them.
Yes, I will do that. No, it's a nice idea.
You're welcome at any time, Philip,
Okay.
to join. Yeah, we'll send you invitations.
Okay. Well, I have a lot of other things to do. I'm into motorbikes, and I have a social life which is rather busy. But every now and then I try to pick up some photography. I make photographs since I was 12 years old or something. I'm 55 now, so I should do this more, but life is busy. But I like it. I still like it.
Are those real motorbikes or Oriental sewing machines?
No. It's